Welcome to Inspiring Business with your host, Mark Bullock, who is the co-founder of videosocials.net and of videointerviewpodcast.com. In every episode, Mark interviews business and organizational thought leaders who share their stories of how they inspire others by making a difference. You can find this show on videosocials.net and YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and almost any podcast platform of your choosing.
Welcome. And today I'm really pleased to have Phil Crowley as a guest on my show. Phil is a former physicist who decided on a career in corporate law. Phil is a managing partner of Crowley Law LLC in New York, in the New York metro region. His boutique firm is focused on helping innovators in the life sciences and other technologies develop their products and bring them to market. He brings with him experience as well as a Wall Street lawyer and a corporate attorney with Global Health Products company, Johnson & Johnson. And Phil is a client, and just getting to know Phil the last few months, and really a special individual. Welcome to have you, Phil.
Thank you so much, Mark. I'm delighted to be here with you.
So terrific. And you've got I'm just going to say right up front, you've got a podcast. That podcast is From Lab to Patient, Garage to Market. And I always kind of like to start off with, what's your story? What's your why? And I would invite you to kind of include how that turned into also doing a podcast, because, it's a very, very, very tiny percentage of the global population that does any kind of, thing like that, but but not only a podcast, but a video interview podcast. So, would love to hear your story. And
well, actually, that's a good question, Mark. There are two whys. The first why is that as a former research physicist, I understand how difficult it is to find and develop new knowledge. It's a long and sometimes lonely journey for scientists. And when I was in the PhD program at Harvard University, I could see that I was going to be about 7 miles deep in my area, which was superconductivity, but only about a half an inch wide. And it would be a long time before the things that I was researching were going to really help people. And so that's why I switched to law. But the idea was to try to help innovators take those great ideas and bring them to the marketplace and profit from that. Mm-hmm. And I saw in so many instances where founders were not well advised early in the development process that they wound up losing much of the value that they had created, right, or being shunted aside, and didn't really benefit from that. And so it seemed to me that I was in a really great position to do that. And while I was at Johnson & Johnson for over 30 years, I had the opportunity to do a lot of transactions in the life sciences and technology spaces. And I saw over the years that the big companies were slimming down their basic research effort, moving more into development, and then relying on small, innovative companies to come up with the great ideas that they would then commercialize. And so I saw an opportunity for me to kind of move from the big company side of the table, right, to the small company side of the table, and to try to help those innovators realize the gains from all of their hard work. But there's an ultimate why as to why I thought this was very important. I was so fortunate several years ago to come together with a group of people that formed a charity, Hope Through Education, a fund for better futures, that's focused on providing scholarships to families and for students in kindergarten through 12th grade who are seeking to escape underperforming public schools and get into academically rigorous, values-based private schools. And I said, wow, that really connects with me. And if I can generate and make my law firm successful, I'll be able to support that effort even more. And it brings back a memory of my dad, my late dad, who was a great proponent of education, really
Mm,
encouraged me to pursue
right.
academic excellence after he gave up his education. He dropped out of high school during the Depression and wound up working as a laborer and then as a driver and a bus driver. And he did what he could do. And, he had a certain trajectory for his life, but
Right.
he helped me change the trajectory of my life. And I'd love to give that to other kids. So that's the ultimate reason. But I characterize myself, Mark, as a technology junkie. I've been on the board at Stevens Institute of Technology for over 30 years as well, trying to help that institution inculcate into many, many classes of really bright young men and women STEM education, science, technology, engineering, and management. And so I'm in it because I just enjoy helping people use technology to improve our communities.
Really absolutely fascinating because, first of all, it's got to be fairly unusual for somebody to be as deep in science as you were to then go and get deep into law, and all of that be revolved around the people that you're trying to serve. And it sounds like that, of course, not only did you do it for that, and not only are you bringing that experience, that passion for learning, that passion for technology and growth and moving forward to the clients that you serve, but you've also doing this wonderful outreach of trying to help others, the younger generations coming up with getting on track to be out on the edge in technology and science and getting businesses built out of that. So really that kind of covered the first three things that I wanted to get into with you today. But maybe we could take a moment and kind of step back to your clients and say, what are some of the key challenges that your clients are facing, especially in the current economic environment, which, since the pandemic, it's like everything's been turned upside down and partially turned back over and partially. It's a whole different environment now. And this last 4 or 5 years has really, shaken things up a little bit. But how do you help them deal with all that's happening? Our political environment is obviously, there's a lot of division. There's a lot going on. How do you help them with those challenges?
Well, the primary issue that my companies deal with as startups is funding. And the pendulum has swung back and forth on that. In 2021 and 2022, with the low interest rate environment, there were tons of money available for investment, and people who were not familiar with biotech and life sciences investing jumped in and put down major bets, tens of millions of dollars in several companies. And what they did not appreciate was the need to do extensive due diligence to dole out the money as the proof of concept progressed, and wound up losing massive amounts of money. And so after the pendulum had swung too far to one side, it then swung back very far to the other side,
Right.
so that there was not a lot of investment money available for startup companies. But the money is clearly there. My wife is the chief medical officer of a biotech company that was in the clinic with a phase 2 clinical study. And they had spectacular results. And so over the past period of time, from November of 2023 through February of 2024, they were able to raise $700 million in additional equity financing as a
Wow.
NASDAQ listed company. So the money is out there. It's on the sidelines. It's waiting for proof of concept and a reduction of risk. And
Right.
so companies that can get to that point can be financeable. The companies before that are really relying on funding from the National Institutes of Health through SBIR, that's Small Business Innovative Research Grants, or STTR grants, which are contracts with federal government agencies or with direct grants from some of the federal agencies in order to be able to survive in that particular environment. So that's one of the primary challenges. Second challenge is the increased cost in order to validate the concepts. You have to go into animal studies in order to validate the mechanism of action of your particular product and to assess the toxicity of the product. Prices of all those things have gone up, just like the price of groceries, gasoline, and other things. So it becomes much more expensive to get to your proof of concept than it used to be. But there are still investors out there who are willing to take the plunge in the life sciences and move forward. It's a little bit easier on the technology side because you don't need to worry about the Food and Drug Administration in order to get on the market in that case. But you do need to have your proof of concept. So I have several companies that use artificial intelligence in their SaaS products. That's software as a service.
Yep.
And they are doing very well. So it's a lot easier to be involved in that. But they all have the challenge of dealing with this new federal requirement to list all of your beneficial owners with the federal government. I just did a brief webinar for BioNJ on the Corporate Transparency Act and what its requirements are. And if you don't mind, I'll give a little plug to a free seminar on the Corporate Transparency Act on October 15 of 2024 at noontime Eastern time. And you can register for that at crowleylawllc.com/free CTA webinar. And what I'll do is do a deep dive into the nature of the Corporate Transparency Act, what it provides, who's responsible, who has to make filings, who the filings have to cover, things like what the penalties are for not complying, and some other issues that are relevant to trying to shield filers' information in this gigantic government database. And of course, the law says that all of that information is confidential. Of course, the law also says that the information on taxes of wealthy people that was disclosed, that's legally required to be confidential as well. And there's a legal requirement that all of that information that was in the White House Human Resources database that was hacked, that had a legal requirement to be held confidential. So I can see that people are a little bit nervous about putting more information, personally identifiable information, into a government database. So those are the sorts of things that we're going to be dealing with. But those are some of the challenges, as well as the challenges of thinking through strategically how to grow and run the business. I was so fortunate to be able to spend 32 years in the Johnson & Johnson Law Department. And as opposed to lawyers that kind of grow up solely in law firms, I had to work side by side with businessmen and learn from some really good businessmen how to think about problems and think through problems. And I also worked with just a few not so good businessmen. I could see the difference between the approaches of the really good, thoughtful businessmen and those who didn't quite make it. And I import that into the kinds of advice, strategic advice, and general advice that I give to my clients. I'd like to say that I and my other 4 lawyers have the benefit of providing big firm experience with the kind of personal attention that people can get from a boutique law firm. And all of us are passionately interested in the success of our companies, not just turning in a memo that we can charge for.
So you started to answer kind of the second half of my question is, how do you help them deal with all of these challenges? And obviously from the conversation that you just had, from the fact that you're doing a podcast, which again is something everybody needs to check out, which is From Lab to Patient, Garage to Market, in which you're interviewing other experts in the field, science and law and business people. I've seen a number of episodes, and so there's a very deep educational component, and you're making that available to the world. And thank you for doing this upcoming webinar that you're going to be doing as well, because there's a lot to it. Two is it's a lot of times it's locked away in tomes of manuals and tax codes and policies and stuff like that. So I can only imagine that, and you've used the phrase, you're giving them a strategic advice, so you're able to look at all of the resources that are out there and help bring to focus what is import to them as well as what is what could be beneficial to them. Am I kind of surmising how you help clients in that, or?
Yes, because clients need services and help in areas that law firms don't provide. And my experience with law firms is they don't like to recommend anybody because they're so afraid of liability. But we have a network of people who provide services that we don't provide. Experts in tax, experts in accounting, experts in the details of employment law compliance, experts in patents, filing and enforcing patents. And we have a group of people that we can connect people with, because typically a young entrepreneur or even sometimes an experienced entrepreneur doesn't really know where to go to find perhaps an insurance expert that can give them input on what's reasonable to do for a matter that's very important, directors and officers liability insurance, and what other kinds of coverage they need. And these days, cyber liability insurance, if you're hacked and have to pay fines or penalties or provide protection to the people who are in your database, how are you going to do that if you're not insured for that risk? And connecting them with people who can help them first identify and then control their risk, because success in business, in my view, is about seizing opportunities while at the same time controlling risk. And it's kind of a broad-based kind of view. It's not just looking at what the legal risks are, but trying to appreciate the other challenges and risks that our companies are facing, and then being on the lookout for opportunities. I regularly make my clients aware of government programs and opportunities at accelerators, technology accelerators that help young companies grow and develop, so that they're aware of these opportunities that they can use to help themselves. And so it's more of a holistic approach than kind of what I would view as kind of an academic approach, which kind of takes me back to my days as a physicist.
Right. So, so would you say then that, two of the key factors are recognizing and managing the risk, obviously having an eye out for and pursuing opportunities. Are there any other key factors that you would say it's important for these entrepreneurs to be successful?
Well, having a strategic view about what's the end point, where do you want to go? Are you looking to create an ongoing entity, which if you're in artificial intelligence and have a SaaS platform, is eminently available, it's eminently scalable. If you're thinking about creating a vaccine or therapeutic, you're probably looking at a strategic view of entering into some type of collaboration agreement with one of the big players, and then having them fund substantial parts of the research in return for an option to obtain an exclusive license to that, rather than trying to grow the company up and put in all the operations, all the distribution, all the marketing, all the regulatory compliance, all the market pharmacovigilance, looking out in the marketplace to see what the experience is, which is very expensive and time consuming. And so to a certain extent, it makes a lot of sense for big companies, Johnson & Johnson, Merck, Sanofi, Eli Lilly, to go out and find these little companies with these gems and to take it. And it's like plopping it into a machine that can do all the other things that you need to do to have widespread, worldwide distribution of a successful drug. And the thing that the young company does is it's de-risking it. And the more you de-risk it, the more you get up into the area of 8-figure valuation, 9-figure valuation, 10-figure valuation, based on the size of the marketplace. And those are things that I am looking to help my clients negotiate as they develop their technologies. Because, as I said, I used to be on the big company side of the table in those discussions and negotiations, and have an understanding of the sorts of things that big companies need and want, but also have a very great appreciation for how important it is to protect the interests of the innovators so that they get the major chunk of benefit from all the hard work that they put in over the years. And it does typically take years. I joke sometimes with my clients that it's taken them 8 years or 5 years or some period of time to become an overnight success. When you're a success, you're immediately recognized, but people don't recognize all of the trouble and the worry and the disappointment and the setbacks that you have to go through in order to get there. So entrepreneurs are quite a sturdy breed, a group of people who are willing to work, not to see if they succeed, but to work until they succeed, and to have the persistence to do that.
And what keeps coming up for me is that it's such a huge benefit that you have such deep experience with these larger companies, because these smaller innovators have got to be worried about being taken advantage of, being swallowed by, swimming with sharks, as it were, right? Being a minnow out there swimming with sharks. And although they may have a wonderful idea, they really need somebody like you and a firm like yours that can really help guide them through those sometimes treacherous waters of negotiating, significant, really their future to a large extent. So
well, that's the value proposition that we try to make clear to our clients, because we like to have the feeling that we deliver, if we're not delivering 2 to 3 times in value to the client what we charge for what we do, we're not really doing our job, because the work of those clients in technology development is just so important that they deserve, and we want to provide value to that effort. So it's something that we focus on. And my experience at Johnson Johnson, also internally at the firm, induced me to go through an exercise with our team and say, well, I spent 32 years in Johnson Johnson Law Department, and Johnson Johnson has our credo. And I would encourage your viewers to go out to jnj.com and look for the credo, and you will see that it puts customers first. The doctors, nurses, patients, physicians, others, mothers, fathers, and others who use our product, everything must be of high quality. They then say they have to be fair to their suppliers. They have to be fair to their employees, give them opportunities and safe working places. They have to contribute to the communities in which they operate, pay for mistakes, pay for their taxes. And if they do all of those things, the shareholders should get a fair return. Well, people don't realize that in 1943, when that was promulgated by Robert Wood Johnson, he was the majority stockholder of Johnson & Johnson. It was still a public company. And so he was saying, well, put me last. If I do all these things first, then, I'll get a fair return. And I'm sure he was viewed as a radical in 1943. But, you hear versions of that in multi-stakeholder focus by some corporations. And so it's only taken 70 or 80 years for other corporations to catch up to Robert Johnson. So I took, and Johnson & Johnson tried to inculcate that into the workforce, because it's a wonderful tool for alignment. If everybody has kind of a North Star of what they're looking at, then when there's no instruction for what to do, or it's unclear, you kind of look to that for guidance. So what we did is to put together a set of 5 values to govern our interactions with our clients and with ourselves. And I go over that at every staff meeting and on alternate staff meetings, discuss what it means to us. And the 5 values, which I'm sure everybody on the core team can repeat, is first, professionalism; second, integrity; third, accountability; fourth, communication; and fifth, efficiency. And every now and then we take one of those and discuss it and say, well, how does that affect what I do? And what should my expectation be for others? And I just find it really helps in terms of the working relationship among people who may not be in the same office or may be working virtually. But it's just, I think, a great idea for listeners to take away, and that is having a set of values that live in the hearts of the people who articulate them, as opposed to just putting it up on a wall and say, yes, check the box. We have a set of values, but we don't talk about them. We don't talk about how they apply to what we do on a day-to-day basis. And so it seems to me you don't get the value of alignment on those. The other thing that's important about is it helps you select new employees, because if a person is tremendously competent but is toxic in your environment, they will actually detract from some of your other performers and may make some of those performers quit, which would be bad. So my view is that if you have a chance to hire, my particular view is to have a high performer who's consistent with your values, that's best. If you have a person who doesn't quite have the skills that you need, but has the right attitude, that person is a better choice, because when I view potential employees, skills I can teach if you're willing to learn. Attitude, not so much. And so it's good to get people with the right attitude, in my view, and train them up to what they do. And then there are people with uh, toxic attitudes and low competencies. We don't want those. But even the high performers with the wrong attitude can get in the way. And I've learned through my mistakes that that is certainly the case. So I'd like to share one of my mistakes to help people understand what may be a very helpful approach for them, although I'm sure there are companies where people don't have to interact very much, where you just need high performers who act on their own. But my group is a group of collaboration and cooperation, and in that kind of environment, having the right attitude and being able to be a part of our culture is extremely important.
So summarize all of that, in our company from a standpoint. I think it was Phil Collins in Good to Great, but it might have been somebody else. Hire for character, develop skill. And you it's very difficult to coach somebody or mentor somebody through a character change or shift. Skills are easy to teach if they're teachable, right? And so that's part of it's part of the character. Are they are they teachable? Are they open-minded? Are they do they appreciate and want to be in alignment with? Do they want to collaborate? Do they want to co-create? Et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's literally foundational for us. We don't bring anybody on that we don't feel like is either gets it or is going to get our values, our mission, et cetera, because all that has to be alive. As you said, writing a mission statement and et cetera, and sticking it in a manual up on the shelf, it's absolutely meaningless. It has to be a living, breathing purpose that you have and values that go with it. And so I'm very encouraged to hear that's important to you and how you've set as a foundation for your firm, so that everybody's on the same page. They know why they're there, what it's about. Obviously, we're all of service to our clients, and from that perspective, if everybody's trying to do their best, and they're working with everything, and they're willing to communicate, as you laid out the values, right? If they're fulfilling those values, things are going to work. Things are going to go more smoothly. There's going to be, as we all know, there's going to be challenges and potholes that we fall into, et cetera, et cetera. But if you can lean into the values and be able to count on accountability with count on each other through that, we can get there. Then it's just a matter of persistence.
Yes, right? And with respect to alignment, I think that having values that are accepted and reinforced with people make management so much easier, because sometimes it's difficult to have a manual of policies and procedures that tell you everything to do all the time. But as I was saying, if you have as your North Star, our basic premise, our values, it's more likely than not that you will do the right thing. And it allows management to give the individual employee more autonomy because they understand and accept the values. And it brings me back to Simon Sinek's book, Sinek, Understanding Why.
Yeah, I know him well.
I think that there are so many people. I've seen surveys of employees in the United States that show that the majority of them are disengaged and don't feel like they have a purpose in what they're doing. And so having the leader explain to everyone and reinforce to everyone why it is that we're doing what we're doing. You may have a mundane task to do, but if you're supporting technology development by these wonderful, passionate innovators who need help to get their ideas from the lab to the patient, from the garage to the marketplace,
Right.
it instills more meaning into what you're doing. And even though some things may be somewhat tedious, you have an idea that it's towards a greater goal. And my view is that it helps me motivate my team.
And what a great place to wrap up, Phil. It's been an absolute pleasure. Your website is Crowley Law LLC. Your podcast again is From Lab to Patient, Garage to Market. There'll be links below to all of your social media profiles, your audio podcast platforms that you're on, etc. Just a real pleasure, Phil, and frankly, a real pleasure to see that you get it from a standpoint of leadership of an organization, small or large, needs to have a purpose, and you need to have people tied in and behind and engaged with, and in many cases help co-create that purpose.
Right.
And so it's kudos to you. I wish you all the success, and I'm really glad to have had you on. Thank you for being a client. We're delighted to have you as a client. You're doing great. You got your podcast up and going, and I think it's doing wonderful. And I appreciate having you today.
Well, Mark, thank you. And thank you so much for putting together your podcast, because I think it's important for entrepreneurs to be able to see real life examples of people who are actually out there doing it. And reading books is great, but also hearing about the successes, the failures of people who are out there doing it, and the need to be persistent despite failures and setbacks is really an important, it can be a very encouraging part of the entrepreneurial journey.
Absolutely. Be well. Thanks, everybody. See you next week.
You've been listening to Inspiring Business with your host, Mark Bullock. Your positive comments, likes, and most importantly, your sharing of this show with others is greatly appreciated. Don't forget to subscribe to the Inspiring Business Podcast on whatever platform you prefer. You can catch prior episodes on videosocials.net and on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and all the major podcast platforms.